Other Voices SCV with Carole Lutness presents Bridging the Gap. Good evening. I'm Carole Lutness, and I am the host of our Santa Clarita Public Radio program, Other Voices SCV 107.9 on your FM dial. And instead of having conversations with individuals, we've been working on having a forum with people from varied backgrounds in Santa Clarita, people who I have always admired and respected for their contributions and their the quality of service that they give to the community. And last time we began a discussion about how we can improve our relationships when we have a variety of political and social outlooks in this community. So tonight we have a smaller panel, but still very diverse, representing Republicans and Democrats and independents and African American and people of Eastern background, people with a variety of religious beliefs, because we are a community of many resources, many fine people representing varying viewpoints. Tonight we have returning guests and also Jim Debris, who has been a frequent author at The Signal. And so we want to welcome him on in his debut of this little venture. We want to learn how we can move from being enemies to opponents when we have issues that come up. We may have different opinions about what the problems are, how they're solved, but how can we work collaboratively and cooperatively together? I think people were concerned, they expressed concern last time about the online quality of communication, the meanness that can be portrayed on Facebook pages and Santa Clarita websites, and just sort of not a healthy problem-solving perspective. So let's work on this again tonight. I'm going to go through our participants and ask you each what did you gain from last time, or did you gain anything from the last time? And what are some of your ideas about moving forward? Al, how about you?
Okay. Well, I don't know whether I look at this a little differently than the rest of you, but I don't view anybody that I see on the screen as an enemy. We all have our own viewpoints, and that's okay. So what I noted from the last session, and then when I came to see you, Carole, and we edited, you showed me a book, and it had to do with slavery in New York. So I was kind of amazed because I didn't really know that. I thought that New York was a free state. And so I went and I researched it, right? Which gave me a new perspective about things. So I just believe that there's nothing we can do about people that don't want to look at things objectively. There's going to be some mean people that are going to say rotten things or not want to even think about the possibility that they may have an opinion that might not be correct. But from our standpoint, if we just talk to each other and we understand that history is history, and we get a better understanding about certain things that occurred, and we can't change it, but certainly we can learn from it and do better. And that's what I think. The more of us that start acting that way, the better the whole situation is going to get.
Okay, and thank you. Thank you, Al. How about Peg? What did you get from the last session?
Muted, Peg.
Peg,
You're muted.
you're muted, Peg.
I am
Good.
sorry. I was trying to be good so that my cats wouldn't disturb Alan while he was speaking. So here I am. I enjoyed the conversations that we had last time very, very much. I enjoyed particularly our discussions about how much freedom is too much freedom and where would that lead us to. I'd like to see us continue on along that vein a little bit more so that we can possibly come up with some more rounded conclusions about that. And I know that we defined liberty as having equality and justice for all. And I think sometimes I have to take issue with the word of equality. I think equity may be a proper word sometimes to be using, because not everything can't be equal at all times. Some people are always going to have the upper foot, and it's going to be a question of how can we make things more equitable so that everybody will have a place at the table.
Okay, thank you, Peg, very much. Valerie, how about you?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Carol. I think that what I learned, what I got from our last meeting was I enjoyed meeting everyone. There are several new faces here, several I already know. But the conversation, what I got from it was the conversation is necessary. We don't all think alike and we can't change each other's mind, but the conversation hopefully will get us to the point that we respect each other, that we respect each other's opinion, that we respect each other's traditions and lifestyles, and that we realize that just because we don't live everyone's lifestyle, that's okay. That just because we don't agree with everyone's lifestyle, that's okay. We hopefully will get to the point of not necessarily changing each other, but changing the way we think about each other and the way we will learn, we'll begin to learn about each other. I reflected back, as I did some research as well, Alan, on when we talked about slavery last week. And while the northern states were free states, the majority of them were free states, they also had slaves. It wasn't just the South. Right. Statistics say 1 in 4 homes in the North had slaves. There were free slaves there, and there were homes that had still had individuals enslaved. So it's education. It's all about education and not name calling, not disrespecting individuals that don't live your lifestyle, maybe don't even agree with your lifestyle. We're all individuals. We're entitled to be individuals, and we need to respect each other as being individuals.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Val.
Carol, what are you asking?
Yeah, I'm ready. Your turn.
Okay, well, I just want to say that I hope people will introduce themselves too, because this is a new segment and people may not have turned into the first segment, and people should know that Al Ferdman has run for city council several times, and he runs the Canyon Advisory Committee, which is a bipartisan group of citizens in the Canyon Country area that just talks about a bunch of civic issues. And Valerie just ran for the Water District and has just helped in forming the first group of
NAACP.
Right, but I didn't know is it a group or a caucus?
It's an association.
Yeah, it's an association. Okay, I didn't know what the right word was. And of course, Peggy Stabile has been parents of gays and lesbians and really worked on having people understand transgender and gays and lesbians in our community and reaching out and being a loving, welcoming person to that community. And Anyway, and so I'm going to start then with myself, but I hope everybody else will also introduce themselves too. And I hope that was an all right, quick overview for everybody. So my name is Lynn Planbeck, and I do hold a seat on the water board. And I so much wish that Valerie had gotten elected because she has so many good ideas, but we did get 2 new wonderful people that also have very good ideas in other areas at least. And I'm also the president of Santa Clarita Organization for Planning and the Environment, where we look at both environmental and planning issues in our community. And I've been the president for a while, mostly out of default, because as Al Ferdman knows, it's always hard to get someone to do everything you're doing. So whenever you have a nonprofit organization. So what I got out of the last time was one of the same things I think that Al did, is that I don't consider any of the people on the screen ever enemies. They've always been friends, and they have had very varied views. I've had lunch with Jim Debris and had some interesting discussions, and I've had discussions with Tim Ben and just very wonderful, interesting discussions. And what was interesting the last time is I was so impressed with others' knowledge of American history. I did not study American history in college, and Sebastian is just a wealth. He was like an encyclopedia of knowing things. Smart kid. Yeah, very impressive. And I really had not talked with him on a one-to-one before like that. So I have to say I was very impressed. And the same with Tim Ben. You had a lot of knowledge about, and Al too, I think. So that was exciting to me, and I learned a bunch of stuff too. And to me, that's what democracy is about. When you have a discussion and you share your views, often you can come to a center point that is much accomplishes the issue, accomplishes much more because you have shared everything with everyone. And it's created a discussion, and new ideas can arise out of that. So I hope this will be successful and that people will actually listen to it, because there's some interesting ideas that will get floated around, I am sure.
Tim Ben? Unmute yourself, Tim. Yay.
Thank you, Carole. Yes, I just want to say that the last time was most interesting, as I'm sure today will be, because I like to focus on the people that I don't know. Since I know most of the people, I always try to get to know the people that I'm spending time with better than I did before. As a 2-time city council member and as the head of a nonprofit arts organization for 20 years, over 20 years now, the Canyon Theater Guild, it is, the world runs on people. And I was fortunate enough to get into politics, as it were, almost by accident, being appointed to the city council the first time. And I was able to get to know a lot of people all across the political spectrum. Now, of course, you probably heard it before. I don't mean to be trite about it, but really, it's really hard to hate people that you know. And so, since I have friends across the political spectrum, I would never dream of going online and saying nasty things to them or about them. It just would never happen because I know them personally. And I think that one of the biggest dangers we have in society today, in this current world, is the fact that we have the internet and we have a little box that we sit in front of, and something happens psychologically that allows people to say things, horrible things, that they may never say if they were not in a moment of, excitement or unhappiness. And they'll go ahead and put something out there, and there it lives forever. And then the person that sees that, they react, and there you go. And that's unfortunate. So I think that anytime a group of people can get together with diverse opinions, backgrounds, belief systems, is a good thing, because if you get to know people, you can't hate people. You can disagree with them. You can think that your particular way you live your life would be better for people, but you certainly can't hate the other people if you know them. I don't think. And so I was very encouraged the first time around. I'm so looking forward to getting to know a couple of people here that I don't know as well as other people. But I really like the subjects we're bringing up, and hopeful that it will expand so that people that are listening just take a moment, get to know people that you disagree with from a political standpoint, particularly.
Thank you, Tim. Dear Andrew, what's up? What do you remember from last time, and what are your ideas?
Well, I remembered a bit, and in case I forgot, I was able to watch the video just in case. No, so I guess last time one of the things I really enjoyed was, we are getting to a point in this nation where I think we're not able to have conversations anymore. And I think one of the most important things that this, I hope, brings is that aspect of sometimes tough conversations need to be had, and we need to be able to do it in a manner of understanding and empathetically as well. I think each person's views should be understood. And even after this call, I was able to actually get on the call with Al Ferdman after our first one, and we were able to sit and discuss a couple of things that, we both understood each other a bit better. So things like that, I think, are what's important. And I hope that's what a lot of people take away from this. Not necessarily just the education component, but really a component of understanding and communication.
Well, I started out with a discussion about.
You didn't ask Jim.
Oh, well, that's right, Jim. What do you remember about last time, Jim?
Well, I actually watched the video, so.
Oh, wow.
I sort of, I did, I sort of skipped through. I didn't spend an hour watching it, but I would sort of watch it, move forward a little bit and so forth. And I thought it was a pretty interesting, thought-provoking discussion about a number of things. But one of the things I've been thinking about, and Al's story about how he came to your house and he had some interpersonal contact with you. You showed him a book, and that stimulated his thought. And we don't have that anymore because everything is online, everything is virtual, and you don't get to have that interpersonal contact where you see a person's body language, the sort of the nonverbal communication that goes on. And 30 some years ago, I was a partner with Deloitte, and 30 some years ago, we merged with Touche Ross, and there were two camps, and it was open warfare. And what happened was the management figured out this wasn't going to work, so they forced a Deloitte and a Touche person. It was almost like Noah land because there were two of everything, and we had to share experiences with each other. And now it's 30 years later, I'm retired, and I have more close friends from the Touche side of the firm than the Deloitte side of the firm. And we shared so many experiences, and that, that allowed us to move out of our comfort zones, because one of the things that media does is it keeps you in your comfort zone. It feeds you the information you want to hear that reconfirms your biases and reinforces those biases. But when you're talking with somebody who has a totally different viewpoint, you're out of your comfort zone, and that's when you grow. And when you're talking to people and face to face and dealing with difficult issues, face to face, where you're going to act more civil just naturally, then what happens is you move from an environment of confrontation to an environment of collaboration, and that is really that's really the key to solving problems. And we're not solving any problems right now. Everything's getting worse because nobody wants to talk to anybody else because the other guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and we have to overcome that.
Well, that's one of the things I hope we can talk about is the difference between facts and beliefs. The idea that there's a wonderful saying in AA that you should wear your program loosely like a loose garment. and I think by program, it means your beliefs and your attitudes and, all of those things that you're comprised of in that way. And what has happened is we have constricted ourselves. We are so polarized that we put ourselves in this straitjacket of beliefs. And I believe this and you believe that, and treating them as though beliefs were facts. And beliefs are not facts. Beliefs are a hypothesis about what's going on. And that's something that has concerned me so much in seeing the big picture.
Carole, have you seen The Social Dilemma?
No, tell me about that.
It was on Netflix, and basically it talks about a concept of surveillance capitalism, where data, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but where data is very valuable. And,
yes.
And Facebook, social media wants you to stay on your computer, so they keep feeding you information that you want to hear. Television does the same thing, and we've moved from I Love Lucy and Leave It to Beaver and those kinds of shows, sitcoms, and other types of entertainment to news channels that purport to tell the truth, but they tell it in a very biased way.
That's right.
And it's both right and left, and I've been reading quite a bit about this lately, and this is the biggest single issue that, well, maybe it's not the single biggest issue, but it's one of the major issues that we're going to have to overcome if we're going to make progress on any of our problems, because everybody is so entrenched. People can't agree whether it makes sense to wear a mask.
What is the name of the show?
It was The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix.
Okay,
the guy who put the show on has written a couple of books that are really good too. And if you
I was just reading about the history of radio and how it was used by Stalin and Hitler to propagandize the public. And now it's Facebook and Twitter and the people that are behind with their, not Facebook, but anybody with a big following on Facebook or on Twitter propagandizing. And it's a megaphone. And it's a megaphone that can be very easily distorted. And then you have like a lot of people believing, for instance, that Joe Biden didn't win the election. Why? Because of the megaphone that was distorting the fact. And then it created a lot of anonymity and then we couldn't discuss anything after that. So, but it's propaganda. The history of propaganda is pretty interesting. And I don't know how we get back to, like something where it's a stump speech and it's the Gettysburg Address and people go out of town and listen to it, because we'll never get back to there now.
Well, some of those old shows that you were talking about, I always remembered Star Trek always had some kind of a lesson at the end.
Oh yeah, Star Trek.
Yeah.
I've been buying old Star Trek videos and rewatching them. They had so many good legal lessons, and Leave It to Beaver used to too. Leave It to Beaver was a very how do you solve things, and now, unless you read books, you don't really get that. That very famous children's author that wrote Ramona. Now I don't remember her name, but she just died at 104 or something. Yeah. And
tell me her name again, and I remember. But what was her name, Tim?
Beverly Cleary.
Beverly Cleary.
Yeah. And all those stories had not so much morals, but ways to be able to go through a social situation and come out of it without feeling bad or making the other person feel bad. And what a great thing to teach.
You know what? The other day I saw on Facebook a picture of a pit bull that was black on one side of his face and white on the other side. Did you see that picture? And I made a comment that reminded me of the Star Trek episode where they went to what I'm going to say, right? Where they went to this one planet and they had these two tribes that were fighting each other because one was black on the left side and white on the right side, and the other one was the opposite, right? And so they picked, so it definitely was at the time, a more subtle way to talk about why we should not criticize other people just because they look differently than we do.
Right. Well, look at the Star Trek the space deck or whatever they called it, operations deck. I mean, you had Hulu and you had that Scottish Scotty, and then you had
Mr.
Russian.
Spock.
and
Aurora.
and then you had Spock with his ears, and then you had several women. Weren't there several women? There were at least
Yes.
one.
And Carol, you know where that comes from, don't you?
Yeah.
What that tell us
Huh?
this?
That comes from that Leonard Nimoy and was was Jewish from Canada, and if you go to an Orthodox temple at certain times, the Kohanes or the priests make that sign to identify themselves.
Oh, how fascinating. Learn something new. How about the rest of you? What are some of your ideas? Tim, Ben, or Andrew, or Jim, or Val? Peg?
Well, I think that storytelling is going to be very important for us somehow or other, for people to be able to share their stories so that we will know what their lives are like and about, and inevitably find out that we do have many more similarities than differences. I was hoping that when the Human Relations Roundtable was formed, that forums might be held where people could have a place to tell their stories. It wouldn't be stilted, but it could be a community event. So that is something that I think would be invaluable to us if we were able to hear others tell us about them and what's important to them.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, let's move forward with last time we started out with the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all, because I think an awful lot of the why we get into conflict is the
Did you
difference.
go out?
I can't hear you. Say it again. Who said something?
I think my doggie wants to go out in the back.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. A lot of our conflict springs from the liberty and justice. We had a good discussion about what happens if there's too much liberty, and we can kind of do a little wrap of that. And then we do need to talk about what happens when there's too much justice.
Well, I think part of that has to do with the fact that people don't truly understand what liberty and justice for all really means. In a lot of cases, there are certain things that every one of us can make our own decision about what we want to do, or like you said, what kind of lifestyle we want to lead. And as long as we do it without harming somebody else, then to me, that's what it means by having liberty. You have the liberty to do things that you believe in, whether it's believe in a certain religion or decide what kind of a lifestyle you want to live. And as long as you don't harm other people that way, you don't force other people into the same thing that you think is appropriate, that's what liberty is about.
But I've heard a lot of, it's my constitutional right not to wear a mask. Freedom is the ultimate. And it's like, wait, no, when there's public safety.
Well, I think the masks debate is not a good debate because, I mean, just like the column I wrote on masks, there's a mask isn't a mask. And in fact, when you look at them, the N95 masks were not originally made for the medical profession. They were made for people in the construction industry. And the N100 masks were made for welders. And so the cloth masks give you a certain amount of protection. That's true, but it's not ultimate. So, this is not this is not, I think, the kind of thing that is appropriate to use as an example. for the
Well,
reason.
can you think of anything else locally where liberty and justice
Well,
kind of,
actually, kind of,
yes,
I want to comment on the mask thing, and it actually doesn't have to do with masks itself. I think the concept of it is what is really the issue here, minus the mask, right? But there's a ton of different things that come up through society where it becomes a debate of whether or not it's the individual's right or not. And I mean, a mask is just our current situation, but there have been many other instances. I mean, now a mask is, yes, something you wear, but then when you look at other people's rights, for example, too, it kind of comes up with the same thing. And I'm going to give, well, this is just personal one to me, but like marriage equality, for example, right? Somebody else's right to marry does not affect another individual at all. At all. My, however, tax benefit I get from being married does not affect your tax benefit. Rights aren't pie, you know? But there's always this certain group of individuals who go, well, you're ruining it for me. And I think that's kind of what we need to look at. And I mean, same thing with the mask scenario. It's a CDC recommended guideline, right? And states and counties do it. But then you have a small group of people who go, well, it bothers me. And I think this is where the underlying issue comes is you have a subset of people who are saying, it doesn't really affect me. This isn't that big of a deal. Let it go forward. And then you have another subset of people who go, well, it bothers me a lot.
Well, can we start with one thing that I think we'd all agree on? You don't have the liberty to drive through red lights.
or
You
yell
don't have the
fire,
liberty to drive at 100 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone.
or yell fire in the theater, right?
So those kinds of things, everybody seems to agree, well, that's not, the liberty is not the ability to be able to get in your car and do anything you want, right? So in many, many cases, society has got an agreement between of the majority of people, the vast majority of people, that those kinds of things have to be followed. Where we end up with a difficulty is when we have people where the majority of folks or the overwhelming majority of folks don't always agree.
Yeah,
And then sometimes,
I would like to,
go ahead.
I would like to jump in at this point with an
I would like
alternate.
you to introduce yourself, please.
I am married to the director of this conversation.
What a
Right.
My
wonderful
name is
guy.
David Lutness. I am a socialist.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
I would like to say that consider the gasoline engine. Consider the internal combustion engine, and whether or not you believe that global warming is real. Let us consider, for the point of this discussion, that global warming is real, and that one of the driving forces in it is the release of fossil carbon into the atmosphere. And we have worked ourselves into a situation where our civilization, in many ways, depends on the transportation provided by the individual automobile. And certain classes of people who are not bad people, very livelihood depends on the success of the distribution of the internal combustion engine components, specifically gasoline. Say you own a gas station, where more knowledge is presented, and it appears that because carbon dioxide reflects more heat back down than oxygen or nitrogen N2, that the increase in the CO2 in the atmosphere is causing a increase in the heat stored in the biosphere. And that we, as people who live in the biosphere, have an abiding interest in making the biosphere viable. We have to negotiate with all of the players how we're going to deal with this. And I say this as a man who drives a internal combustion car.
Well, a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, which is not a solution.
No.
And I feel guilty about it. But I feel guilty about a lot of things because I'm an alcoholic.
Well, they
That's what I
supposedly
do.
are banning the
The most beautiful
internal
words I've heard
combustion
from
car,
Joe
but
Biden.
Dave,
they're supposedly banning the internal combustion car by 2035. So,
Joe
Maybe.
Biden has actually come out with that, yes.
yeah.
Keep going. I know Valerie has had her hand up for a while. Could we have?
oh, where's your hand? I don't see it. Oh, there it is over there, Val. I'm so sorry. Please,
No,
I
that's okay.
apologize. Oh my gosh. Go ahead, Val.
So there are no bad people in this conversation, but we
Val,
need to
okay?
talk to each other.
Thank you. Val, go ahead.
No problem. I just wanted to respond or comment on the Pledge of Allegiance, which we started out with, and we talked about, you know, what it says that one nation under God, indivisible, and justice for all. And it would be great if we could just live believing that. But when this was written, there wasn't justice for all, and it wasn't one nation under God. We weren't all together. So I think it requires us to go a little farther than that as human beings, as a nation. I think it requires us to go a little farther than that, to make sure, or to ensure that we are one nation under God and that there is liberty for all, because that is not the case. That has not been the case from the beginning. And unfortunately today, it is still not the case.
No, and that's been the
My
big
personal opinion.
that is a very, very good point, because historically, those people that were our founders were really the oligarchs of their day. And they made their point was they were rebelling against oppression by the British royalty. But they did not see indentured servants or white people of a lower class, immigrants, Black people, Native Americans, and women even were not even considered human. And one of the struggles we've been having for 200 and some years is, how do we bring more and more people into this liberty and justice concept? Because very clearly, we're still struggling. We have to recognize that we are a very class driven, and I would hypothesize caste driven society, as are most countries in the world. There are, I think the Norwegians and the Swedes have a lot, they're doing a lot better than we are.
I agree. I believe as people, we will always, I think I said it last week, I don't think it's something that we're going to accomplish and be able to move on. I think it's something that we will face as long as we are people. There's going to be a hierarchy. There's always going to be these individuals that we are always going to, or that are always going to feel like they're different, higher than, better than, whatever, than someone else. So it's something we're always going to have to check ourselves for and make sure that we are being human across the board, that we're at least trying to be.
Al, you had your hand up, hon.
Well, yeah, I just think that when we start talking about things like this is what we understand from history. So it's not, no one has to defend anything that happened then. But as we've gone from the 1700s to the 1800s to the 1900s, it appears to me, and especially in my own lifetime, I've seen things get better.
Yeah, I
I've
was just
seen,
going to say
and,
that.
and
I agree.
and I don't think we're ever going to stop having to work to make things even a little bit better.
Well, my
So-
concern, I agree with you, Al, but my concern is right now, because of a variety of environmental and economic issues, we are at a crisis point so far as if we economically, if we don't have a viable middle class, we don't have a democracy. We don't have a Republican democracy. We have to have that. And if we don't, then there's going to be a move toward authoritarian,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And
let's
that's
take
what
these,
I see.
history.
That's
It's
what I
now.
see happening right now. Peg,
well, let's take
Yes,
these one,
thank
let's
you. May
take
I
these one
speak?
at a time.
wait.
Excuse me?
Let's take these issues one
Alan,
at a
you
time.
had spoken, Alan, you had spoken about how you think things have become much better. And I won't disagree that there have been tremendous strides made. But at this point in time, I've got to say that I see us going backward in many ways. And I think that that's a very important thing for us to be addressing it in our group here.
You know, I hear that all the time. I think the only backward thing we're doing is people that are complaining more. Because if I go into areas, hold on, no, I'm not.
Okay, I'm listening. I'm
I'm not.
listening.
If I go into an area where I'm the minority, and even in my own neighborhood right now, I'm the minority. I don't see people being nasty. They're friendly. We get along really well together. So, you know, when I was 10 years old, I lived in Florida for a year. It was a time that I didn't understand why these people would get off the street, off the sidewalk when we walked by. I talked to my mother and say, what's going on? She didn't understand it either, because we lived in an area in New York that was only with our own group. So it took a while. It took a while for me to understand what prejudice really was. But then I moved out here to California, and my parents had trouble renting an apartment because no one would rent to a Jew. So but today that wouldn't happen.
Well,
I mean, it might happen somewhere, but in the general case, that doesn't happen. So as we progressed, we're getting more tolerant. We're getting easier to get along with.
We are, but we aren't. I
Maybe
mean,
it's
I
just
think
me.
that there is a regression right now going on. And that's why, you know, I think that's why we all are here, because we are reasonable people who try to be civic minded and work together. But the whole flavor of the environment right now, Al, I don't believe it is not healthy. And that's my hope. Yes, Tim. Wait, Val. Okay, Val's next. She's got her hand up.
I'm
And then
sorry, no, my
remember,
hand was up
remember,
before. Let
Tim.
me take it
I
down.
think it was my hand.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Go
Peggy's been
ahead,
holding
Tim.
her hand up for a while.
What, Jim?
I said Peggy's been holding her hand up for a while.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm not good at this. Let Tim talk and then Peg, okay?
Okay, sure.
Go ahead, Tim.
I just want people to like take a breath and remember this, because we're getting a lot of people want to like sweep away history, okay?
Mhm.
And they say, this person, we're taking their name away. We're not going to study them anymore.
Oh, yeah, taking down
This is a lot of this going on where we're
statues. Yeah.
so, and I understand why, because this person had slaves.
Mhm.
This person said hateful things about somebody of a different religion.
Mhm.
But people are not perfect. And so I see a lot out there on the internet. I see a lot of people when I read their opinions, and suddenly it seems that they are the judges for all these people. Not having lived there, not having lived in that time, not looking at what the ideal of the person was trying to put in writing. The Constitution, the preamble, okay, the Pledge of Allegiance. All the people that worked on these things were trying to set an ideal. Now, was the ideal in place when they did that? No, of course not. It was not. These people are imperfect people.
Mhm.
Today's people, everyone here, I venture to say, myself being foremost, are not perfect people. We make mistakes.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think that it's a very dangerous thing right now for people to take the attitude that we must sweep all this away and we will be the judges and it will start today and I will have the perfection of all of you or else. And that, I see it. I see it from both sides of the spectrum. It's very disturbing.
After
There's-
Peg.
There's no perfect
Peg,
people.
Andrew, and then Lynn, okay?
And
Peg?
so when we do that, let us not make the mistake that so many people have made and so many really regressive regimes in history have made, where we take down the statues from the past. We tumble down from the religious icons. We do all those things basically because we're trying to wipe the slate clean. If you don't remember your history, the people that made it and the ideas they had, we will repeat it.
Mhm.
And so I am not a pessimist, but the dark ages came after the Enlightenment. And God help us from not remembering our history, but remembering it accurately. Okay, and making sure that we give credit to those people, not just some people, but those people's ideas that they had. We lose that, we lose it all. That's my opinion. I worry about
Okay. Peg?
Thank you. I would just like to go back to the idea of the storytelling that I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
I'd like us to see what's going on now, because a lot of history is repeating itself in our community. I had the pleasure of attending the women's conference that COC held over the past weekend. And one of the breakout sessions I went to was made up of 4 Black business owners, women business owners, who not only talked very about how they had developed their business and how their business was going and the encouragement they had gotten for that, but they also shared some of their experiences living in our community. And that is what I think a lot of us have no idea about. We don't know. We've not walked in their shoes, but beyond that, we don't know some of the insidious things that are happening right here to our neighbors. And I think that this has nothing to do with canceling culture. This has to do with trying to improve culture by getting to know each other.
I think we have to name it and claim it and recognize that, as Al and Tim say, none of us are perfect, but that doesn't give us excuse not to look at those parts of ourselves currently and in the past so that we can learn about the mistakes we've made. I just finished an incredible book called The Four Winds, which is about an Okie. She really wasn't. She was North Texas in the early Depression, during the Depression, the windstorms and all those horrible things. And she, out of desperation, comes with her 2 children to California. And something that I was absolutely astounded about, not really realizing how vicious California, it wasn't that other states weren't vicious, but how vicious California and the people of California were against the Okies who came in and spent all gave us took our tax money and wouldn't work and all the things that we've heard about, the same kind of thing about Hispanic people during this time. What I heard back east as a kid about Black people, the same viciousness about the other, the different, and that really impressed me, is that this is something that we have to have a constant sensitivity to the fact that the other is not a good way to live. Andrew, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to to comment a bit, and because so much like Peggy said in the last one I discussed, really to like, you know, empathy, and only way we can genuinely really understand one another is from understanding each other's point of view. And we did this at the LGBT Center, and at the end you would say what resonated with you. And, you know, one of the things I always say is, and I use this with my organization, is, you know, there's more that unites us than divides us. And I think that's true. However, I kind of want to bounce on Alan Timben's point. And the reason why is because one, I do think things have gotten better, but I think one, they've only gotten better for certain groups. I mean, historically, things change in the US. Right now, it's our neighbors at the southern border that are being targeted. But before that, it was the Irish, Polish, and Italian. You know, just United States history, whiteness was kind of a made up term, and it just kept expanding to what as time moved on. But also to go on the point of rewriting history, I don't think we're rewriting history. I mean, really, United States doesn't even have a generalized history lesson. It's not like every state in this country teaches history the same way. But one of the issues that we have and is, you know, oh, don't tear down the statues. Oh, this is the flag. Why would you tear down our history? History is in here, in books. Having a statue or a symbol of what once was meant to keep people owned isn't historical. It is, yes, it's a history of our nation, but it shouldn't be flown on a capital of a state. I mean, it's a war that was lost. It is not part of the United States. It is an very unfortunate past of our country that we don't ever address, because race, for some reason, is the Achilles heel of this nation. But I don't want to erase history. I want us to acknowledge it. I want us to talk about it, but I don't want to, and I'm not saying the founding fathers were perfect. I mean, I understand it's very hard for many because I am very close to perfection. I understand. And that was a joke. But, you know, we can acknowledge, it's kind of like when a person passes away. And I think like society, we tend to think, oh my gosh, they're dead. We can now only think of all the good things that they've done. No one ever addresses the negatives of it. I mean, I had a family member recently pass away. Great guy, had a really awful growing up time. I mean, he wasn't a wonderful human being, but as humans, we change. I don't think our founding fathers were god-awful people. You know, they did a great thing. They founded the United States of America, right? But no, they weren't perfect, and there's no problem with acknowledging that they weren't perfect. But people seem to get so upset that we say, oh, well, you know, how dare you? That was just at the time. It was at the time. And as we've developed, we know it's not okay. Just like there are things now that we do that probably when I'm dead, people are going to be like, that wasn't okay. But it's different for the time. We can still acknowledge it, but this tearing down statues and upholding a flag and claiming it as history, it's not. History is in my textbook, and I can learn about it. It's the same way why in Germany, when Reagan broke down the wall, you know, we don't just keep the wall there and say, well, it's historical. Yeah, we learn about it in our textbooks, you know, but we don't keep a wall up there. And same thing in Germany. You don't see statues of Nazis or anything. It's their history, but they don't keep a statue and say, well, you know, it's historical. So I don't understand why people think we would want to change our history when we can learn about it, but we don't have to remind people that, hey, you know, your ancestors, they were done badly by this person who's on the statue. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense.
This is a great discussion. Al, you have your hand up, and then
I had my hand up next after Andrew.
you do. Okay. All right. Hold on. But I want to tell you guys, we're at the hour point, and I think we're going to have to cut it off pretty quickly.
Okay.
We'll cut it off at a very interesting point.
Well, should we go on? I think
well, I would like to just make the point. I would just like to make my point since I had my hand up.
So did Al.
No,
Go
I
ahead.
think I had mine.
No, Lynn, you can go first. I'm
Okay.
fine with that.
Okay, well, I think Andrew's point that it's different to read it in a textbook than to have it on uh, as a statue, I think is a really important point, because in a statue or naming a military base or something of that nature, then you're honoring the person, and it's like honoring Hitler. You know, I mean, I was so really impacted by someone's description of the statue of Sherman that they took down in, I forgot, North Carolina or something, that was in a park, where this huge man on a horse was towering over people in the park that were the very people that he would have whipped, that he would have killed. And, you know, to be honoring that person in your public park, it's like, you know, if we had a huge picture, I mean, a huge statue of Hitler right next to the Jewish synagogue, that wouldn't be considered appropriate. And so I think it was important to take those statues down. I do not think it's important to take the history out of the history books. We do absolutely need to learn about it. We just don't need to honor those people when we know it was wrong.
Al, what were you going to say?
Well, I want to try to use a little different of analogy and tell Peggy a story, because I know she loves stories, right?
I do.
David talked just a minute ago about how we can more effectively live on our planet. And I profess that we're all environmentalists, every one of us. That for years, if you've been alive long enough, you've been doing things as time goes by to use less electricity to do certain things, less gas to do certain things. So I moved into this house in 1965. It had no insulation at all. But when I put R30 insulation in the ceilings and put in double pane windows and insulated the walls, all of a sudden I was using less. I was doing the right thing, trying to get in a position of using my cars today, get probably twice the gas mileage that they did in the 70s. So the problem is that a lot of times, just like this issue, the other issue is the same way, that you can't just turn things off like a switch. You have to work it. Supposing you did get rid of the internal combustion engine tomorrow, well, I would say within 3 weeks you'll starve, because there wouldn't be any food in the grocery stores anymore. You have to ease yourself into this by finding the ways to go make things happen. And in the case of the other issues that we're talking about, it's up to us to act in ways that show people by example that what they were doing is incorrect. So I view it as a process that continues on, and it's up to us, especially if we're the moderate thinkers. It's up to us to keep showing people how much better it is to embrace everybody rather than divide up in the little groups.
Okay, Tim?
Carole,
Yes.
since there is a lot of discussion on the topic that I brought up about history, I want to let everyone know specifically, for them to think about. Everyone picked a statue that they thought, well, that this thing should come down. And I'm certain that some of those statues that they're talking about certainly should have come down, because as time goes by, some things become, when the general public, realizes they come down, that is an advantage for them to do. And there's been lots of jurisdictions. People asked me that when I was in the council, what do you think of this removal of statues? And I said, it really needs to be up to the jurisdiction of the people where the statue is. Eventually, that the federal government shouldn't take a list of these things and say this one is no. It will work itself, as it does in America, through. But the statues that I would give you, that when I talk about bringing down statues, you could think about which one you think you would like to take down, because people have said this, is I'm going to give you, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, Martin Luther King Jr. statue, Jefferson Memorial. Okay. I happen to think these are great memorials. And I have to think that every one of those individuals was flawed. They were not perfect human beings.
No, I agree.
So when I speak of preservation of history, that is the type of history that I am saying that be careful about taking all that away, and be even more careful about taking away the ideals that these people wrote down, that they could not live up to because they're human beings.
That's right. That's a good point. Jim, you've been very quiet this time. Do you have any thoughts, any final thoughts?
Well, there's been a whole lot that's been said here. One thing, about the statues, and you have to remember, somebody mentioned the military bases and so forth. That was done 100 years ago because that was the 50th anniversary of the Civil War, and the South was trying to, spiritually at least, resurrect the old antebellum days. And we were going to war with World War I, and Woodrow Wilson was worried that the Southerners wouldn't join the army. So he created a regime where he started naming military bases after Confederate generals. That's when you started seeing the proliferation of of the statues. My wife's grandfather, he was a veterinarian, and he graduated from Ohio State and moved to South Carolina. And in his memoirs for the family, the town he lived in, he said that we just decided it wasn't a place for us to live. So I Googled the history of the town, and that's where the Klan started going. They first thing happened was they put up statues, then they started lynching people, and it was a horrible place to live. And that's the environment of the statues, and why people are so upset. And I think one other thing is sort of my last thing I'll mention is, I think with media, we're transforming from an industrial society to an information society, a database, technologically based society, and things happen much quicker. So people become much more impatient. And I sit on the board of an organization that incubates startup not-for-profits around LA County, with a special emphasis on the inner city. And I was on the board for 20 years, and then I stepped off, and I recently went back on. And one of the things that always happened was, when we worked on a project, everybody was sort of happy with incremental progress. But now when you go talk to people in the centers, the inner cities, they don't have the patience anymore. And I think the information age has just kind of made everything happen so much faster. And I think that's creating a tremendous amount of societal pressure.
Well, I do want to say that those people that in the inner city have been waiting for this incremental change to happen, and they have not gotten a whole lot. I mean, I do think that is an issue. That people,
I don't dispute what you're saying.
minorities, the particularly minority people. I mean, I don't know, Val, do you agree, or what do you think?
Of course, I agree. The information has been out there for decades, even centuries. And so I think a lot of it has to do with, if you are not an inner city resident, if you are not a minority, then you may be unaware. Your history or your knowledge of history is different from my knowledge of history, or from my living. I tell my grandkids all the time, this is not history books. I have seen white only water fountains with my own eyes.
Me too. Me too.
It's not history books. It is my life.
That's right.
And I agree that, or I believe that a lot of what other people may not believe, or what white people may believe, is because they don't know my history. They don't know, what I've lived through. They don't realize that what we saw happen to George Floyd, you only know of because of this social media era that we're in now, because it's so visible, but it's been happening all along. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is ignorance. And when I say ignorance, I'm not calling anybody, ignorant. I'm just saying it's just ignorance of
Lack
my
of knowledge. Yeah.
of what's happening now that you're just not aware of. And so what we're having now is important because it is, it is learning. It is learning for me, it is learning for you. And so that's why we need more forums like this. Like I think Peggy said that she wished that the roundtable, the mayor's roundtable, would have more forums. These conversations are necessary so that we know that some of these individuals that are statues right now, some of them had slaves because it was legal to have slaves, but some of them had slaves when it wasn't legal to have slaves. And so the history is out there, and we all need to know what the history is. So
yeah. Thanks for that. Val, Peggy, go ahead.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned, Carol, the word cast.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes, I used cast and class. Yes.
Right. I just completed a book called Cast. And
I just finished it a few weeks ago.
okay, and I would like to highly recommend that book to anybody who would like to learn more and to have a fuller understanding of things that Valerie is talking about here. It actually, our caste system in the United States was what the Nazi Germans used to base their purging of the Jews on. They followed the Southern Jim Crow laws and learned how to get rid of people based upon our South. So please read Cast, and I think you'll find
they came over and studied how America was able to subjugate their minorities. And they did that and applied it to Jews and gypsies and gays and all the other people that they.
So you're going to have to edit this to make it an hour.
I know. I think we're going to have 2 segments, don't you, Al?
Well, no, I think, some of it, I mean,
the whole first half was trying to figure out how to put our hands up.
Well, we didn't start.
Good.
But anyway, it sounds like you all
here.
Do you all want to do this again?
Yes. Can I just bring one thing full circle from what Valerie was saying? I said it in my opening remarks. I talked about how important it was to have interpersonal contact. And one of the things that's happened to me is through my involvement with this organization opened up my eyes and caused me to see a lot of what's, a world that I don't live in and I never did live in, and changed my thinking. And I was able to bring some of my skill set to bear to help a lot of things happen with community-based organizations in the inner city. And I think if we could find a way to get people together interpersonally and forget about all the, all of the social media stuff that creates, tribal behavior, and the people who live in South Central LA they're good people too. And they have a lot of issues that we don't have here in Santa Clarita, but there's a lot we could do to help them.
Well, that's a good way to wrap up, I think. I have had a wonderful night, and I look forward to us coming back. And so I guess we're going to say good night for right now and hope to see you soon.
Good night.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.